Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Luke, an ACA qualified accountant, having passed all 15 of my ACA exams at the first attempt while studying at a Big Four firm. And after my time at the Big Four, I transitioned into a career within investment banking, and I now spend my days helping current candidates study towards the qualification and ace their ACA exams. And in today's video, I want to discuss a few tips that will help you get through the ACA certificate level assurance exam. The assurance exam is one of the more straightforward exams you will encounter along your ACA journey. It's very much an introductory module and acts as a precursor for more challenging exams that are going to come down the line, like audit and assurance and corporate reporting. Audit is just one of those topics that comes up time and time again across the ACA qualification. You'll be introduced to it here, but it spans so many different modules and exams across the qualification. I can't even tell you. You're going to see it in this exam at the certificate level, but it's going to pop up elsewhere. It's important to put in the work now, accumulate the knowledge, get a decent understanding of what audit and assurance is, because that's only going to pay dividends down the line. Assurance is probably the second most challenging certificate level exam, in my opinion anyway, behind accounting. It's a multi-choice based exam, so there's no long form written question, it's all multi-choice, but the examiner will write questions in such a way where it's quite hard to detect and identify the correct option. I remember when I sat the exam, I found it very difficult to distinguish the correct option from the three incorrect options in the multi-choice questions, and there'll be lots of ambiguous questions where you'll be reading through the question and the four options, and I would say 2 to 3 of the options kind of feel right, and it's quite hard to distinguish which of them is the correct answer, which are just trying to catch you out. And this is the kind of skill set that you need to develop before you go into the exam, so you're ready to tackle these kind of awkward, uncomfortable questions. As I was saying, this paper is completely multi-choice based. There's no long form scenario based question. So each question is worth 2 marks each, or 2% of the overall exam. Pass rates are pretty healthy for this exam. Around 85% of candidates that sit it go on to pass. So it's pretty good. Not as high as some of the other certificate level exams, but certainly not as low as the accounting module. So pretty decent pass rates. I'm about to run through some tips and some advice to help you get ready for exam day, to focus your exam strategy, and hopefully just make you feel more confident walking into assurance. So yeah, let's get started. My first piece of advice when it comes to the assurance exam is to not rush. Assurance is not as time pressured as other certificate level papers such as accounting, management information, principles of tax, principally because there's no long form scenario based question. It's entirely multi-choice based. There's no real quantitative calculation based questions that you'd see within an accounting or within a management information. So most people finish the paper within, I would say, around 50 to 60 minutes. But the real issue with this exam is that the answers to the questions, or the options that you're given to the questions that you're asked, are not always black and white. 2 or 3 of the options can feel like they could be valid answers to the question you've been asked. So it can be hard to distinguish, particularly on the first read through, right from wrong. So therefore, taking a moment to pause and read the question carefully is so important to doing well on this exam. If you fly through and rush through the paper, it's very easy to skip through key phrases and key wordings that are included within a question and then just completely misinterpret it and get it all wrong. Go back at the end of your first run through and check every single one of those questions twice, if not 3 times, if you've got the time left over. And during your first run through, if you're not 100% sure about a question, don't worry, flag it in the software and come back at the end of the exam and address it when you've got a bit more clarity, you're a bit calmer, because you will have time to look at questions twice or even 3 times in this paper. It's not as stressful as an accounting. And yeah, the questions are highly subjective in this exam. It's completely common for candidates to come out thinking that they've got 0% or they've got 100% or somewhere in between. It's very hard to get a gauge as to how well you're going to do in this exam before you go in and walk into the sitting, but it's even harder after you've come out because the questions are so unclear. Feel comfortable that the pass rate is so high. Candidates do well in this exam, so even if you're not feeling completely at ease with the content, be aware that most candidates do pass this paper. My second piece of advice when it comes to the assurance certificate level exam is to trust your gut. Don't try and second guess yourself too much in this exam. A lot of the people that I know and that I speak to who fail this exam go back after their first run through and start changing a lot of their answers because they're second guessing themselves, they're unsure of what they put down in their first run through, they're not trusting their gut. This is not a good exam strategy. It's not good in any exam, let alone the assurance exam. Your gut instinct is usually right. And to make myself completely clear here, what I'm not saying is that you shouldn't go back and check the answers that you put down at the end of the exam. You should absolutely do that. In my opinion, you should go through and check an exam paper twice, 3 times, if you've got that amount of time left over. But what I am saying is you should not go back through your assurance exam paper and make wholesale changes to your answers. The more time you spend looking at one question, the more likely you are to start doubting yourself and make second guesses, which usually ends up in disaster. Your gut is typically right. When you are reviewing your answers, go with your gut where possible. Only change answers where you've clearly made a silly mistake which needs rectifying. I would encourage you not to change more than 2 or maybe 3 answers in your assurance exam paper on the second run through. Make sure you have good reasons for justifying those changes as well. Don't just change them because you feel like it may be option C and not option D, but you don't really have a valid justification for backing that up. Make sure you're clear in your mind as to why you're changing your answer to a question. The first answer you put down is more often than not the correct one. My third piece of advice when it comes to the assurance exam is to spend time learning internal controls. Internal controls include the identification of an audit risk, how you would manage and monitor such an audit risk, and testing of the response going forward. And the ICAEW make a big deal out of internal controls. In the syllabus it says that 25% of the exam will be made up of internal controls. And they also flag that this is an area where students do the worst in. So look, this is a huge area of the syllabus, and given the ICAEW keep pointing it out, it's an area of student weakness, they're probably going to keep on testing it. So this is an area of the workbook and of the question bank that I would really recommend honing in on and focusing on, because the ICAEW say it themselves, candidates aren't doing well in this area, we're going to keep on testing it. So I would use that information to your advantage and make sure you're comfortable with internal controls, how they're applied, what risks they help resolve, and just spend time getting your head around this area of the curriculum, because look, you know it's going to come up, so focus on it, get comfortable with it, and if you do know it well, hey, you'll be on your way to 25% of the marks. My fourth piece of advice when it comes to the ACA assurance certificate level exam is to spend extra time on multi-stage questions. So multi-stage questions are those questions where they have 2 parts. They have a part A and a part B. And the key thing that you need to know about multi-stage questions is that you need to get both parts right to get any marks. So if there's 2 parts to a question and you get the first part right and the second part wrong, you get no marks. So the ICAEW, I think, is pretty cruel in this respect, but that's kind of the rules of the road. If you get one element correct, one element incorrect, you get no marks. You need to spend in your exam more time on multi-stage questions because there's greater risk of losing marks. And I have 2 key tips when it comes to multi-stage questions. My first tip is if you get to a multi-stage question in the exam and you don't know the answer to the first part of the question, well then just move on entirely. If you don't know the answer to the first part and there's a high chance you'll get it wrong, then even if you know the second part, there's no real point addressing it at this stage because you could end up with 0 anyway, even if you get it right. So prioritize the questions in the exam that you're comfortable with and you know the answer to, because if you're spending time on multi-stage questions where you don't know part of the answer, there's double the chance of ending up with nothing. So when it comes to multi-stage questions where you don't know the answer to the first part of the question, I recommend just flagging that question and coming back to it at the end. My second piece of advice when it comes to multi-stage questions is if you are confident with the questions and you do know both of the answers, then make sure you double and triple check the answer that you put down at the end. It's very easy to input the wrong option. You've essentially got 2 opportunities to make a stupid mistake and accidentally put in the wrong option. I mean, it happens in every exam. A candidate knows the answer's option A, but they put option B. You have to get both parts right in a multi-step question to get any marks. My next piece of advice when it comes to assurance is not to spend too much time in the workbook. and I would allocate a lot more of your study and revision phase to question bank practice. I remember when I studied the assurance exam, I found I learned a lot more about the content and about the material by hammering questions, doing as much question bank practice as possible and doing as many mock exams, and then going back to the workbook and mopping up any of those concepts once I'd identified my weak areas through question practice. That's the key. Start with question bank practice, identify weak areas by going through the question bank, and go deeper on those sections of the material by going through the workbook once you've done questions. Unlike exams like accounting, where I recommend learning the content first because you need an understanding of the content before you are able to address questions, I think assurance works better the other way around. Start with questions, identify what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then focus on those weak areas by going through the workbook once you've done the question bank. Just get into the question bank as soon as you possibly can. Do it 3-4 times and be clear on all of those questions, because the questions that come up in the actual exam aren't too dissimilar to what you'll see in the question bank. So if you've got a good understanding of those questions and the answers that underpin them, you'll stand a really good chance of doing well in the actual exam. It's a much more efficient strategy to start with questions because you're not going to have much time to study towards this exam. Most candidates have a week, 10 days at most. So starting with a 300-page workbook and having to go through that is going to be pretty cumbersome. It's going to take a while, and you're much better placed just starting with questions and then coming back and focusing and refining those weak areas as you go. My next piece of advice when it comes to doing well in the assurance exam is to use your practical on-the-job audit experience. Now, if you're someone that's watching this video and you work in audit, i.e. that's your day job, well, hey, you've got an unfair advantage when it comes to this exam and the audit and assurance exam that comes down the line. You're going to know a lot more about the intricacies of how an audit works than other candidates that have never worked in audit a day in their life. So don't be afraid to use your on-the-job experience to help you answer and address questions where relevant. Your skills will come in handy here, I can guarantee that. You will know things about how an audit works, the mechanics, the testing. Leverage your knowledge and your experience in this exam. It will come in handy, definitely. There are a lot of questions that come up which you can utilize your on-the-job experience to help answer. There are a lot of candidates that just won't have that real-world experience, and it's easy to forget that. So don't be afraid to fall back on that experience, fall back on that knowledge when you're addressing questions in the exam. My penultimate piece of advice when it comes to assurance is aimed at candidates that are studying accounting and assurance together, i.e. you're on a training scheme and you've been asked to sit accounting and assurance back to back. That's what I faced when I studied towards the ACA. I know a lot of candidates have to study those two exams together. So this piece of advice is tailored towards you. So what I would do is I would prioritize accounting over assurance. Accounting is by far the more demanding, time-consuming and challenging exam. It has a much lower pass rate. It has a pass rate of around 65 to 70%. It's a lot more content heavy. You need to actually understand the concepts that underpin it to do well in the exam. And yeah, it's going to take a lot more work. I would recommend spending around 80% of your time studying towards accounting and 20% of your time studying towards assurance. Like, the disparity is that big. Accounting is just far more challenging than assurance. You're much more likely to pass assurance even if you only do, a couple of days work to study for it. Time spent on assurance should be predominantly spent doing question practice, whereas when you're studying towards accounting, you need to spend a lot more time actually going through the workbook and understanding the core concepts, actually understanding accounting fundamentals, as well as doing question practice and preparing for a long-form scenario-based question. There's just so much more to do in accounting, so you need to focus more of your time on that module. I mean, I would say that it's impossible to pass accounting without actually understanding the fundamentals. So you need to go through the workbook, understand the concepts, whereas I think there's an argument that you could pass assurance just by doing question practice alone and not spending any time in the workbook. Hence why I feel an 80-20 split is fair. And last but not least, when it comes to assurance, I would recommend thoroughly reviewing the question bank. I've said it throughout this video, and I'm going to say it one last time. The key to doing well in this exam is question bank practice. You need to get through that question bank 2, 3, 4 times, but don't just do the question bank, understand the question bank. Be comfortable that you understand all of the questions that you're faced with, you understand the answers, you understand why the other options that you're presented with are incorrect. You can't just whiz through it and walk into the exam. You need to have a decent understanding of the questions, of why the answers are correct and why the other options are incorrect. If you don't have this, you're not going to do well. So I would recommend going through it 2, 3, 4 times, review it, and be comfortable with the material. And at the end of the day, this is all building towards audit and assurance at professional level. So you need to have a decent understanding of the material now, so you're ready to do well and thrive at those later levels. Cool. So that's everything I wanted to discuss in this video. That's assurance in a nutshell. So I think key takeaways and key points to get you ready for the exam are question bank practice. Do as much question bank practice as you possibly can. Get comfortable with the questions. I would put the workbook to one side, only refer back to it once you've identified areas within the question bank that you need to spend more time understanding and getting to grips with. Don't rush the exam. The exam's not super time pressured. People tend to do well in it, but I would recommend going back at the end, checking your answers, making sure you haven't done anything silly, and definitely go through the paper twice or even 3 times if you've got that kind of time left over at the end of the paper. And yeah, if you found this video helpful, please feel free to like and subscribe. I'm making tons of videos about the ACA. I'm making courses for all 15 of the exams, so it'd be great to have you come along on this journey. And if you've got the assurance exam coming up, I wish you the best of luck for it. You're going to absolutely smash it. And I'll see you guys in the next video.